Greetings, one and all. Nice to see you all, and thanks for watching my shows. I've had quite a few people getting in touch lately about the Gurdjieff work and asking the question that I myself used to be asking all the time. How do I find a school? How do I find the mystery schools? How do the masters find me? You know, it's something everybody pondered about, even Ouspensky himself. I think this is why maybe he was a bit depressed in his last few years. He was probably quite disappointed that the masters didn't turn up and take him away to some school somewhere. How do we find a school? Well, I think by just doing the work. We're doing the school ourselves. We're being the school. We're re-educating ourselves. As we know, the education we get from our school days is what Gurdjieff would call one-centered. It's quite repetitive. They're like telling us what we need to know just to get through the lunatic asylum that we live in, but it doesn't, does it? We all know that it doesn't help us. It's not the education that helps us develop ourselves. It's an education to keep us dumbed down. So I feel that really we have to be a school to ourselves, be our own teachers, learn from other people. You know, as I've said before, I'm not the only one doing these little shows. I'm just passing on information, but there's other shows out there that you can watch and learn from. And of course, there's the books. The books are, you know, like the school that we need. You know, Gurdjieff's books, Ouspensky's books, Steiner's books. So I'm going to stick to Gurdjieff on this one. I'm probably not going to bring Steiner up at all. You know, we've got books by a lot of people that work with Gurdjieff, and I still find them very interesting. I still learn something from them. They still help me to develop my understanding of the work. You know, there's some of them come at it at a way that maybe I hadn't thought of before. Recently, I put up one of the pieces of writing by Jean Toomer. You know, he was with Gurdjieff in Fontainebleau, but okay, not for long, but he managed to work with himself. He worked with Orage for a long time, but he managed to develop himself. And this is something we can do. I mean, it's self-education, I suppose, is what I'm trying to pass on to you all. But I thought I'd do some quotes, as usual, from Gurdjieff's writings. And I'm going to start with All and Everything, Beelzebub's Tales for His Grandson. And this is page, let me just get my bookmarks, 369. To his misfortune, nobody aided the crystallization in him of the data for the ability of intentioning, actualizing, being part dog duty. And this is our misfortune as well. Our schools, our peers don't teach us. Some do. Some of us are lucky to have met somebody that can help us to develop ourselves, but they are few and far between. But hopefully there's more and more of them coming, and you will develop yourself so that you can help others. And, you know, there are schools out there that, okay, I said I wouldn't mention Steiner, but I'm going to, you know, we've got the Waldorf schools for children to go to, which are based on Steiner's work. You know, it'd be nice to see some Gurdjieff-based schools perhaps out there for youngsters. I know there are families which have been in the Gurdjieff work for generations, and their children have developed from learning from their parents who are passing on the work to them. You know, it does work. It does work. Where was I going? Right, so, but many of us have been brought up in the mainstream, in the lunatic asylum. So we are having to deprogram ourselves. As Gurdjieff says, he's here to make us forget everything we've learned and relearn anew. Because the whole point of all this work is to be able to develop ourselves to be the best that we can be. And we need to recrystallize ourselves and break all that past programming of what we were taught in past education, so that we can develop ourselves, so that we can go forward and do the work, such as being part dog duty. You know, do unto others what you would like done to yourself. Well, this helps teach you all this, or this golden rule of doing this work. It's not just helping yourself, it's helping everybody and everything else, all and everything. From, you know, the little teeny weeny insects or amoeba of the planet, all the way up to the divine source up there. We're here to work with, if we can re-educate ourselves. And Gurdjieff says, and he's talking about Beelzebub's talking about education and what it's been doing to humanity. These freaks lose that outer mask, which thanks to the same maleficent education, most of them have learned to wear, and thanks to which they can conceal their genuine inner and outer trifling significance from others. And in consequence, they automatically become slaves of others to the degree of humiliation. And people do become slaves to themselves and to others. People become slaves to the system. We're trying to break that. We wanted to free ourselves from this system, from the lunatic asylum system, and develop our own system within ourselves so that we can go forth and be developed and not have the mask on of trying to fit in with this society and go along with all its rules. We want to remove the mask and be the real person that we are, the real I. We don't want to be wearing a mask. We want to be showing our true face, which hopefully is a developed one. You've got your centers developed, you become more harmonious, and your face will express how you are. I don't know if you know about some of the Old Testament people, such as Moses. He came down from the mountain with the 10 commandments, but his face was radiated. People shine when they're developed, which does attract some weirdos sometimes, but hopefully you can help them move on in their way. But it brings a different essence to you, because it's not just working on yourself, it's your body, it's also working on your aura around you and the bodies within that you're developing. And we're trying to shine forth. As I've said in other shows, we're trying to be the sun, we're trying to be that solar person. And Beelzebub was saying also in All and Everything, hold on, I'm going to go back a page. Education founded on a morality based solely on the considerations and indications of the uni-being himself and the most holy individuals near to him. So the uni-being himself is the divine source. If we could have an education that's based on him, an understanding of how the whole cosmic universe works and how we're part of the mechanical, wrong word to use maybe, but the interactions of the universe and how everything works with everything. If we had that education, we'd be much more fully developed people, rather than the mindless, repetitive, not really giving you any kind of education of the schools that we go to. And he talks a lot about helping children to develop, to teach and suggest to their children how to be insincere with others and deceitful in everything has become so ingrained in the beings of the planet Earth. And don't you feel that with your own children, with your own schooling? Our teachers are teaching us to lie, our parents teach us to lie. Everybody's trying to get out of being truthful because they're looking for an easy way, or they don't have the answers. A lot of the time, they don't have the answers. Terry Pratchett, one of my favorite authors, who wrote the Discworld series, said that, parents are lying to their children from an early age. And it's not right. And children, when you're young, you should be able to sense that something's wrong. And then we start distrusting our parents and distrusting our peers. Maybe that helps us break away from the lunatic asylum system and instead go and look for another system, such as Gurdjieff. They educate their children never to be able and never to dare to do as the conscience present in them instinctively directs, but only that which is prescribed in the manual of bon ton. And I could agree with that myself. When I was a kid, I remember having my conscience pricked. I would see things being done by my parents, by my teachers, that I wasn't happy with, that I knew was wrong, but they still did it because for them it was some easier way. Or like we've often seen children being told off for doing something from a parent, and the child says why. They want to know, why is this wrong, or why can't they do that? And then the parent responds, because I said so. Well, that doesn't make sense, does it? That's a rule you're being dictated to, rather than being shown how to grow and evolve. But a lot of parents, especially asleep people, they're still children themselves, and they're still acting like children. And then they've got these little children to look after, and they want them to be adults because they don't know how to turn them into adults. So they treat them like adults themselves. I, met many parents that talk to their children like they're adults, and they're still children. And they need to be children. Children must be free to be children. It's very important to have a childhood. And some of the people that I know as adults now that are very broken, I've realized didn't have a childhood. They were thrown into adulthood pretty quickly, but really it was more a case of, because of the situation they were in, they had to grow up quickly, which is a great shame. But thankfully, they've turned out to be okay through finding some kind of spiritual, soulful work. I'm sure there's many out there that are still broken. So, All and Everything, page 818. Our common father, endlessness, is only the maker of a free-centered being. The genuine creator, however, of his essence, during the period of his preparatory existence, is his oskia nostana, namely he whom your favorites call tutor or teacher. So for us, we need a good tutor, a good teacher to help us develop. And, as the whole show was about finding a school, it'd be great if a master does come to you. I wish you well, and something like that happening, or you might be lucky enough to come across a school that can help you. There's many Gurdjieff groups out there. There's many reading groups. It's not necessarily a school. It's other people like yourself trying to develop themselves. The schools are really for those that, I don't mean to be rude to you or myself or anybody else, but it's for those that are really worthy and really wish to do this work. They will discover it. Though I think Ouspensky wished it. He wished it with all his will, with all his mind, with all his heart. But he seemed quite disappointed that he never found a mystery school. And maybe there's other reasons why there's no mystery schools around, collecting up people such as Ouspensky, perhaps as such as yourself. Maybe something else is going on in them higher echelons that we don't know about, which is why we can't find these schools at the moment. Hopefully they're watching over us and looking out for us. I've said before, I often pray to Gurdjieff himself for my understanding of the Gurdjieff work, or assist me, or Raj, or, I don't think I've prayed to Ouspensky, but maybe I should try that. There's many people that were in the Gurdjieff work that have passed over to the other side that we could call upon to help us. But I wanted to do some from Meetings with Remarkable Men, because he talks a lot about education and institutions in this. But he talks a lot about his father as well, and how his father helped to educate him. And he said on page 44 of Meetings, "My father took measures on every suitable occasion so that there should be formed in me, instead of data engendering impulses such as fastidious, repulsion, screaminess, fear, timidity, and so on, the data for an attitude of indifference to everything that usually evokes these impulses." Because these kinds of feelings can hold us back. And fear, as I say many times, leads to the dark side. So we need to overcome fears from a young age. And one of the things with mainstream education and such like, they instill fear in us. Be fearful of the police, be fearful of the institutions, be fearful of the government, be fearful of your teachers, And it just shouldn't be like that. We should be a community trying to help each other instead of sitting in fear of our peers. I had a few teachers that were very nice and tried and weren't like that. They were against that kind of thing, but obviously they got into the school system because they wanted to help children. So there are people like that out there, thankfully, in the institutions. Gurdjieff's father, if you read Meetings with Remarkable Men, did a few things that were like a little, now I'd be shocked at someone doing this to his children, but Gurdjieff had the temperament and the mentality to be able to see this was part of his education. And his father would always make sure that he informed him of this before anything like the little tricks he played on him happened. I wouldn't say that people parents should suddenly think, oh, I'm going to get my children over fear and just suddenly put a snake in their bed so they just discover it without explaining to them that sometimes we need to develop ourselves and against such things as fear and fastidiousness and such like, screaminess and screaminess and such like. But that's how sometimes parents are trying to shock their children into being what they want them to be, rather than being what they want, rather than what the children should be developing into. You know, I know many people have children because they see them as mini-me's and try to mold them into doing the things that they had failed at themselves, so they make their children do it. Again, a sad state of affairs, but these parents don't understand what it is that they're doing to their children. People think that their children that they have give birth to, and or their, you know, their children are going to be exact replicas of them, but people aren't. We're different. People have different, are born on different days, will have different astrological charts, so they will be having different degrees of, you know, certain awareness in them. You know, like a professor father might think that his children will all become professors, but one of them children might be a bit more of a bodily person, go off and be a sports person or something. Parents put a lot on their children. But anyway, let's carry on. We've all in meetings with remarkable men. Meetings with remarkable men. So this is on page 57. In order that at a responsible age, a man may be a real man and not just a parasite. I try not to be parasites. Remember Hussein thought of us all as slugs when his grandfather was telling him all about us. We don't want to be slugs, we want to be humans. In order that at a responsible age, a man may be a real man and not just a parasite, his education must without fail be based on the following 10 principles. From early childhood, there should be instilled in the child belief in receiving punishment for disobedience, but not beating them to a pulp. I'm not saying we should be a nanny state or anything, but there are also parents out there that have a bit of a mean streak. Hope of receiving reward only for merit. Love of God, but indifference to the saints. Remorse of conscience for the ill treatment of animals. I've been discussing this lately with a friend of mine about how many animals we had as kids and weren't really explained how to look after them. I remember getting hamsters and wanting to hold them straight away and things like that. You know, nowadays, thankfully, there are pet shops that teach people that hamsters are timid things and shouldn't really be touched for the first couple of months of receiving one, and let them get used to their house and have to give them a ball to play around in and things, and then get to know your hamster. You know, I always wanted that animal in my hands and be like Dr. Dolittle immediately. I also know a lot of kids that used to ill-treat animals. I've known a lot of adults in the past that have ill-treated animals. That's a lack of conscience in them. You know, if they can't look after an animal, it's like the AA, Alcoholic Anonymous. They give their people a plant, you know, look after this plant. If you can't look after the plant, you're not ready to look after yourself. And we're on this planet to look after the plants, the animals, the birds, the insects, the fish, all things, everything breathes. I think one of Gurdjieff's aphorisms is, love anything that breathes. And people go, oh, stones don't breathe. Well, they do. You know, geology breathes, trees breathe, plants breathe, everything breathes. So we should be loving everything. Right, where did I get to? Fear of grieving parents and teachers. Fearlessness towards devils, snakes, and mice. And that's quite an interesting one because I do a lot of work about demonology and such, like with other people, not raising demons or anything like that, how to redeem demons, how to dispel demons. And I wonder if over the centuries where people have been, you know, churches slowly waned out and been weaned off people, and it's become a rational, logical world, people aren't looking at things like demons as the reason for much illness and much badness in the world. And so I'm not aware that they are out there. But that's another show. I'm going to try and get someone on to discuss that more anyway soon. Joy in being content merely with what one has. That's the old, don't desire, apart from desire to develop yourself and go forth. You know, don't desire for material things. or, you know, that loving husband or wife that you may be desiring. So many people come to me looking for the partner, that's all they wish for. And it's like, maybe that's not the answer if you want to develop yourself. Or maybe if that's all you're looking for is a partner and, you know, your loved one, maybe you're not ready for working on yourself yet. You need to get that out of your system. Or maybe you'll find someone that wants to develop themselves as well, you know, and fall in love and go off and develop yourselves together. That'd be great. Sorrow at the loss of goodwill of others. Oh, I come across that a lot. Goodwill of others comes and goes. Obviously, it depends on what state that person is in at the time, what eye is coming through, whether they're feeling good and happy and willing to be, you know, good willing. But we must be good willing ourselves as well. And it can be a difficult state of being to keep up when so much shit goes on in this world, so much crap's thrown at us. But we have to be good willing and God willing as we go forward. Patient endurance of pain and hunger could be coming this way, people's problem with all the food and the food shortages that might come, I don't know, or whether they're going to try and make us eat insects. I don't know if that's all part of the planned agenda that's coming. Definitely don't really want genetic modified food spreading across our planet. But at the same time, it doesn't necessarily have to be a food hunger. It could be a emotional hunger, it could be a hunger for finding God, a hunger. Loneliness is like a hunger sometimes. So loneliness isn't necessarily about being with people. It's just what was it I was being told the other day? Loneliness can also be the case of that you're just not being listened to or not able to say what you want to say because you're not with the right kind of people that accept it. And it makes one feel quite lonely when you've got thoughts and feelings inside you that you want to express. The striving early to earn one's bread. Well, striving early to earn one's bread, whether it's money and education, so you can get out of education and go on to work, so you can live for yourself. You know, do you live to work or do you work to live? But it could also be the striving for earning one's bread of doing some kind of spiritual, soulful work and such like. And Gurdjieff goes on in Meetings with Remarkable Men. This is on page 250. An institution which has as its fundamental aim the correct, harmonious education of man, based on experimental data accumulated by me, who, having been brought up by people with normally developed consciences, has been able to acquire the capacity, no matter what the circumstances, always to be impartial. My father fostered in me the irresistible urge always to be making something new. All my childhood games were enriched by my imagining that I was someone who did everything, not as it is usually done, but in a special way. We want parents and teachers to encourage us to be ourselves, to be the real us in us, encourage us to go and do things, to develop ourselves, find new hobbies, be able to do all kinds of things, you know, like whether it's carpentry or sewing or, you know, to be able to survive life, really. But I do find that education, modern day education, seems to just want to make the person find something they're into and follow that as a career. Well, we should be able to be, you know, a jack of all trades. Master of none? I don't know. I'd like to think that we become a master of everything. And Gurdjieff's grandmother said to him, you know, don't do things as everybody else does. Do it your way. As long as you're not harming anybody or hurting anybody in that process. So we're trying to develop ourselves so that we can develop other strands of ourselves and that we can do other things rather than just do what our schools taught us, which isn't a lot really. Our mainstream schooling, that is. And he talks about childhood games there, how important it is to have childhood games when you're a child. Maybe as an adult as well. We need to have fun and enjoy ourselves. But I was quite lucky. I had lots of other children around me, so that I spent a lot of time out in the fields playing football or whatever, you know, mucking about with other kids. But that's not for every child. Some children just like to stay in and read books. I was a bit like that as well at times, just like to sit in and read. Some children are quite insular. Some children need to mix with others. But if we can encourage them to join in now and then, they might find they enjoy themselves. This is a bit of a long quote now from Meetings with Remarkable Men, same page, 250 to 251. The ideas of my first teacher about education, in addition to the fulfillment of my scholastic duties, I practiced various manual crafts and skills under his special instructions. As soon as he noticed that I was becoming familiar with any particular craft and was beginning to like it, he immediately made me give it up and pass on to another. His aim was that I should develop in myself the ability to surmount the difficulties presented by any kind of new work. But I think also when you start getting used to doing the same thing over and over, it becomes mechanical, and then we're not getting something out of it. But also at the same time, it's a good thing to go and learn something new. You've figured out how to do that. Now it's time to do something else and figure out how to do that. You know, got that hole in that bucket, you need to figure out how to fix that hole in the bucket. And to do that, you need to be educated in how to do that kind of craft. You know, your wiring in your house needs redoing. You know, it's always good to get an electrician in, but if you can learn from that electrician, you might be able to stop something, or you might be able to fix things in the future. You know, let's learn different things. Thanks to the resourcefulness, breadth of view, and above all common sense developed in me by correct education, I was able to grasp all the information I collected intentionally or accidentally in the subsequent course of my life, the very essence of each branch of learning. Instead of being left with merely an accumulation of empty rubbish, which is the inevitable result among contemporary people of the general use of their famous educational method called learning by heart. Learning by rote, my school used to say, we've got to learn by rote. Sometimes they made it fun, but then we didn't learn anything else from that. So, but merely gathering an accumulation of empty rubbish, oh my God, so much of that I learned from my schools. You know, not many real teachers teach you much finer things. To teach and suggest to their children how to be insincere with others and deceitful in everything has become so ingrained in the beings of the planet Earth. They educate their children never to be able or never to dare to do as the conscience present in them instinctively directs, but only that which is prescribed in the manual of bon ton. I've already read that before. I'll read it again because I accidentally changed the page, but it's still an important thing. You know, we have to be sincere to ourselves and to those we're teaching if we want to help people develop. But our mainstream schools are quite insincere with us. And we don't want to accumulate empty rubbish. We want to accumulate fine quality things. I want to go to views from the real world. Views from the real world is Gurdjieff talking to some of his students. And he reminds us that we listen to our own thoughts when learning, therefore we cannot hear new thoughts, only by new methods of listening and studying. And that's so true. I remember I spent most of my school in imagination because I just didn't want to hear what the teachers were saying, really. I found it quite boring. And so because of that, when I did start wanting to do education properly, when I was older and go and do my degree and even the Gurdjieff work, I had to try and break that pattern of falling off into imagination, staring out the window, you know, to avoid all the education. And I had to reprogram myself so that I could take in what I wanted to learn, what I wanted to know. But then I also had that desire in me. I went to university and did a degree in divinity because I wanted to learn theology. So I had that behind me to help me go forth and do it. I didn't go and do that until I was in my late 20s. I couldn't have done that when I was younger. I would not have wanted to. I would have been too busy partying and, you know, still in the old way of falling into imagination to ignore what was really going on. and only getting snippets of what the teachers were telling me. But because I was developing myself by the time I did go to university, I was able to be awake enough to take in what I was learning from the university degree. Okay, again, it's still the old learn by rote way of doing things, but it encouraged me to research what I was interested in. And hopefully, you should be like that, because you wouldn't be looking for shows like mine if you weren't already looking for ways of re-educating yourself. I can't be here giving it to you, on a silver plate, the answers. You need to go and find them yourself. But we can encourage each other to go and find the answers on which routes to take and where to go. Like, I highly recommend Views from the Real World. Obviously, it's written by the students of Gurdjieff, but it's not written as a story. It's more like a Q&A with Gurdjieff. Right then, where was I? Every man comes into this world like a clean sheet of paper, and then people and circumstances around him begin vying with each other to dirty this sheet and cover it with writing. Education, the formation of morals, information we call knowledge, all feelings of duty, honor, conscience, and so on enter here. And they all claim that the methods adopted for grafting these shoots shown as man's personality to the trunk are immutable and infallible. The dirtier with knowledge, the cleverer a man is considered. The more writing in the place called a duty, the more honest the possessor is said to be. So we need to cleanse ourselves so that we can go forth and learn, this esoteric teaching and take that on board and re-educate ourselves, which is what we're going to be doing. And he says, a child's education must be based on the principle that everything must come from his own will. Nothing should be given in a ready-made form. If something is told to a child directly, he's being educated mechanically and later manifests himself equally mechanically. And that's what I'm meant to say about with, I can't give you the answers on a silver platter, because you will then go and that's mechanical. You will go forth and just develop mechanically. I'm trying to encourage you to go and find the answers for yourselves and ponder on these kinds of writings, which I'm sure you are doing and working on yourselves. I'm just covering my bases here. So that you ponder, develop, and become the real version of yourself going forth, rather than a mechanical version of yourself. And then he says, why was the horse not educated? Education needs time, needs suffering. Between the positive and negative principles, there must be friction, suffering. This leads to the third principle. It is 100 times easier to be passive so that suffering and result happen outside you. Inner results, which is what we want, is achieved when everything takes place inside you. We're going forth, working on ourselves, and letting it all accumulate. I've said before, sometimes you need to go off and ponder, perhaps let it settle in and go and find something new to work at, or a distraction maybe would be good, I don't know. And the answers start coming up if you're working on yourself, and the centers start coming through, start spinning together and working together and talking to each other, because they know that there's an I in you that wants to do this, and that I hopefully is beginning to come through and talking to all the centers to re-educate you. I'm going to go to, just check I'm finishing. Right, that's me finished with Views from the Real World. I want to do some knot. Just give me a moment. Right, so this is CS knot. In our time, education leaves off where in ancient times education begins, that is between the ages of 18 and 21. The idealistic period when youth is waiting for something that will give more meaning to life than it sees manifested in the lives of those around it. At this idealistic period, life is full of electricity, but there is no one to show youth what to do with it. The result is that the most idealistic become cynical, become cranks, or take to drugs, or go in for an overindulgence in sex. They fall back on their instinctive moving center. And I could say this about so many people that I knew growing up. Thought they were going to go far and wide with what they were doing, but they got stuck in life and weren't developing themselves. They were stuck in that mechanical way. And there was a need in them, a hunger in them, but they didn't know how to fulfill it. And I know many people poo-pooed going to God. Many people would not go and look at New Age or go and look for spiritual or soulful help because they just poo-pooed it because of the way they were being brought up in a rational society. Was that is not the answer. And so because of that, they missed that spiritual boat that would take them on to the next stage in their lives. I was quite lucky that in my life, I've always had a spiritual, soulful yearning. And I think these people did as well, but they were just worried of being ridiculed and humiliated. And I would say that perhaps many of them, if they met me now, I wonder if they would still laugh at me for what I do now and the spiritual path I've taken, or whether it might make them think that's what I want to do. It's never too late. You can always start a new class and do this kind of work. You know, we can unlearn that rubbish that we've been taught and relearn the spiritual, soulful little person inside us that's wanting to come out and do this work. You know, it's allowed. Just got to be brave to do it if you're worried. If you're worried about it from a social point of view and whether people are going to laugh at you and that, then maybe you're hanging around with the wrong people. I don't know. But then I've also know a lot of people that get into this then want to go and spread the word to other people, and then they get ridiculed and that puts them off, or they end up retreating. There are a lot of things that will try and stop you do this. There's a lot of demons out there that try on to interfere and try and throw you off this path. But it's worth it if you really want to develop. It's so worth it. And I'm going to end, this is actually what I'm going to come from next. This is a French book called Questions, and someone translated some of the parts for me. And then they told me that Fring, I've forgotten his first name, he's put some bits in his dictionary of Gurdjieff work, which I have been known to use sometimes. I do like, oh, I feel awful, I can't remember his first name. Fring, T-H-R-I-N-G. So he did some translations of these French, this French book, but it's not been published. It's, you know, it's just snippets here and there. So this is from what's called Questions. I have always sweets in my, oh, this is Gurdjieff speaking. I've always sweets in my pocket, and when I see a child, I give him one. His father, mother, or aunt, without exception, say, "What do you say?" Little by little, the child begins automatically to say thank you to everyone and no longer feels anything. This is not just idiotic, it is a crime. When a child really wishes to say thank you, I understand it. I understand his language, and it is the language which I love, only to see this impulse. But when you repeat to children, "What do you say?" you kill everything. You kill the future of the child. You kill his goodwill. Everything is automatic. We make children work like machines that react in one way or another according to whether one presses one button or another. We're trying to break them reactions. We want to act, not react. You know, if we want to find them mystery schools or be taken into these higher schools of developing ourselves, we need to start working on ourselves so that they can sense them out there. I'm a strong believer that when you start working on yourself and developing yourself, aid is out there listening and strange things happen. So I would like to thank you all for listening. I wish you well in your search for mystery schools. Maybe you'll find one. If you disappear off this planet and go and work in one of them mystery schools, that's brilliant. That's great that you've been chosen. I'm sure you'll do great work. So thank you. Till next time. Peace.